Hello, this is David Gronowski, writer, speaker, entrepreneur. The following are excerpts from an interview I conducted with Dr. Wei-Ping Yu at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in April 2017. In it, he presents his discovery, a unified particle theory of everything, which, if correct, changes our fundamental understanding of physics. One particle, one universal force. Secrets of the universe are still out there. Maybe we have such little innovation in the world of atoms because our current model of physics has failed us. Perhaps Dr. Yu's theory gives us a better map of the physical world, which we can use to chart new technological voyages. I find his case a clear picture of the universe, one that allows us to set sail for lands not currently existent on our current map. We will test for phenomena not possible with our current model of physics. Low temperature nuclear reactions, elemental transmutation, anti-gravity. Join us.
4 years ago in 2013.
Okay.
That was at that time, so there's a news talking about James Webb Space Telescope and try to accomplish one thing that struck me called try to observe the first light. The first light. Or called the oldest light. I would think about maybe we have a problem with our understanding light. So you can see through these three transparencies, right? Mm-hmm. So you can see through three of them individually, or I stack them together. Mm-hmm. You can see through it. So if light is a stream of particles, particle can go through three of them in a row. So one would expect, of course, if I take one away and stack two of them together, mm-hmm. one would expect, of course, you can see through it because particle can go through three of them. Particle should go through two of them. Let's see what happens. I don't know if you can see what happens. Light being blocked. So here's what I did. I rotate. So now, my question is, why light have anything to do with the rotation of some transparencies, right?
Yes.
Particle can go through them. The particle of light can be infinite small. Mm-hmm. So why light cannot go through two of them? So maybe this kind of particle concept of light may have the problem. So now I have another transparency in my hand. So what happens if I keep my left hand, the light being blocked, just sliding this actual one, the third one, into them? What do you expect? Most people say, of course, if light cannot go through two of them, there should no way for light to go through three of them. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's conventional logic would tell us. Right. If I do this one, if I put it in the back, mm-hmm. even though if I slide it in the middle, no change. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, people play psychology with me. Say, if you ask, I'm gonna just say, yes, you can see through it. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens if I slide it in the middle, 45 degrees. I don't know if you have a lighting can see through it. That means light cannot be a particle. If a particle can go through three of them, particle should go through two of them. Now, I try to demonstrate. Try to demonstrate what is light. Okay. So here is a 9-volt battery and a little light bulb. Look at what happens if I put this one here. That's my flashlight for the hurricane season. Okay. So the question is, can everyone in the auditorium can see this light?
Yes.
People say, of course. So my next question, imagine if light is a stream of particles from a light source, how many particles would be needed for everybody in the auditorium to see at the same time? In order for everyone see the light particles at the same time, because of different distance, different directions. That means this light particle generated from the little berry has to occupy every single point in the auditorium at the same time. Is that possible? If you think about it, you can generate enough particles, occupy every single point in the auditorium at the same time. That means infinite times infinite, 3-dimensional. So that's impossible. So what I thought about it, okay, so let's think about it. Another alternative explanation, say, assuming light is a wave. See, assuming the space in the auditorium filled with particles already. Already. So there's no particle whatsoever traveling out light source. Conventional understanding is see light is light has a particle traveling out the light source across the street space and hit your eye. Since the light cannot be particle, if it's a wave, it means space already filled with particles everywhere. So what happens for the light source? The light source is nothing more, just a little disturbance. And then, just like a water fill up the ocean, when you throw a rock, create called excitation, and then what happens? Create a ripple and a wave. And this wave is already in vibration in the medium and travel at the speed of light. And after 1 second, that means traveling around Earth 7.5 turns per second. Basically, everybody on Earth can see this light at the same time. So the conclusion is, whenever see light, there's no particle whatsoever traveling outside of the light source. It just make a excitation or disturbance, and then create a vibration of the particles already in the medium. It's a medium particles in vibration. Or you can say, whenever you see light, there's no particle traveling at the speed of light hit you whatsoever. Otherwise, we all go blind. So what happens is the particles next to you is just vibrating. So that's how you can sense what is light. If light is not a stream particle, it's a wave motion, I think, well, what about electricity? Can electricity be through a flow of particles? So can be a wave motion. So I re-examine, so that's Ohm's law, which assumes electricity is a flow of electrons. So I said that in order for something flow at 70% of speed of light, goes about Earth 5 turns per second. It has to have a continuous closed circuit. So what happens if I cut the surface open? Then we should not have a flow and should not have electricity. So then let's watch this one. So I have a fluorescent light bulb on original packaging without open.
Okay.
And see what happens. So where does the electricity come from? That's a big moment to discover what is the nature of electricity. What is electricity? It's oscillation of a magnetic particle. Electricity is wave motion. That's how this one generated electricity. This is basically a miniature Tesla coil, generate alternating magnetic field. See, when magnetic field alternating, we will see electric field. So what is that? Because when you have an alternating magnetic field, so then the light bulb, every single particles in this bulb is magnetic particles start to oscillate too. That oscillation of magnetic particle is my definition of electricity. Somehow, smallest atom has constantly some kind of electron constantly in orbital motion. So it never makes sense to me. So this time I have to say, after so many years study, I think about it. Do you believe called perpetual motion machine? No physicist believe this is called perpetual motion machine because it has been tried since the beginning of civilization. People have tried to create some kind of called a closed system, continuous running without losing energy. So because of that what? Because this is going to be violate the fundamental law of conservation of energy. Because we always have friction, always create heat, sound, vibration, it always losing energy. So it cannot be perpetual motion forever. However, what we physics, proposed to the world is every single atom is a perpetual motion machine. That is the fundamental problem with modern physics. This is my model of atoms. Let's see, we know every matter, everything we see, touch, are compressible, which means there's an elasticity to it.
Yes.
If you compress it, it can recover it. In other words, between every single atom, there are space. No problem with that, right? Yeah, no, there are spacing. So the question is, I said, okay, so what force make an atom apart from each other? What is the fundamental force? We know these springs are made of atoms.
Yeah.
So this elasticity comes from the structure of atom. So what kind of force make them apart? The common answer from the audience is gravity. So my question is, no, gravity is attraction only force. If gravity is the force, keep them apart. So gravity is only attraction, so everything should be collapsed together, lumped together. So gravity cannot be the force, keep them apart. So what else the force can keep atom apart? I use this demonstration. Can you see there's a little shiny magnets here? So what happens if you look at it? This thing have a spacing between two ends. So what happens if I do this one? You see there's a spacing and the elasticity. So what is this force? If you look at it, I have 3 magnets. It is magnetic repulsion. Keep atom apart. Okay. So atoms can generate magnetic attraction and repulsion. So my next question is, what is the atom? Only magnetic particles can generate magnetic force. If atom, due to magnetic attraction repulsion, to lock in place, of course atom is just magnet. So what I find is the universe, the atom actually, no parts in the atom in any type of orbital motion. No. All matters actually made only by one fundamental particle. I call the UON, called the universal particle. It's just a little magnet particle, just magnet. The universe only have one fundamental forces. We call the field force, is a magnetic force. All other type of called field force are different manifestation of this magnetic force. So what happens if I push in 2 electrons towards each other? Like pole repel, unlike pole attract. So that means electrons should repel each other. let's see what happens in our real life. Our electrons are like charge repel. A plasma ball. So basically, it's a miniature Tesla coil. Did you see this lining filament, right? This means the inside of this ball, filled with millions or billions of electrons. Whenever you have some generated light, it's because it's electrons, some type of motion of electron generate light. So if Coulomb's correct, Coulomb law correct, electrons are like charge repel. So this filament should spread it all over. The last thing you would say, electrons are attract. If they attract, Coulomb's law would be a health problem. Let's see what happens. Why they form a line? Continuous line. If electrons are negative charge, they should repel.
Yeah.
What makes them all attract together? So my son actually said, well, it could be just like a water hydrant, water come flow. So may not be enough to say they are attract. So now let's watch you say, if I spread my finger apart, did you see? Did you see? They all want to come together.
Yes.
So why like charge particle attract?
Something's not adding up.
I'm challenging the fundamental law of electricity. So now I try to demonstrate another principle, say, the so-called single charged particle, called a negative charged particle, electron, or positive charged particle, we say a positron or proton, cannot exist in this universe. People would think everything we learned, we have a negative electrons, electricity, everything, and a positive. If that cannot exist, are we going to have to rewrite physics? I said, exactly. But the question is, how can you prove this? Okay, so I'm going to try to demonstrate what's the problem with called a single charge, or called a unit charge particle, monocharge particle. Assuming this is an electron, negative charge particle. So what happens if I split this particle in two halves? I got two negative charged particle, 50%. So what happens if I try to pushing them back? Can you make a two negative charged particle to be a one big negative charged particle? David?
No.
Because violated Coulomb's law. Like charge repel. Okay, so we said that we cannot put the two parts together. Okay, if we cannot put the two negative charge particles together, how could this electron to X form in the first place? Can you form a negative particle electron in the first place? If no parts of this one can form to a big one, so how could it come first? The same thing happens to the positron. So if I split them in half, so I have a two positive charge particle, there's no way I can put a positive charge together if Coulomb's law is correct, like charge repel. Right?
Yeah.
So if they cannot, if the smaller particle cannot form a one big giant, positive particle, how could those positive particle exist in the first place? There's no way. So then, what happens if I do this? The electron has both positive and negative charge. Now they can attract each other. That's exactly what's happening in here. Electron is nothing more, just a little magnet. I hope you still remember atom is a magnet.
That's right. Yeah.
Electrons nearly 2,000 times smaller than atom is a magnet too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I wanted to show what about the smallest particle in the universe? If that's a magnet, right? So then it can show everything made by magnets. Since the light spectrum can go, the frequency can go to infinity, means the wavelength can go to infinite small. That means the particles make up the wavelength will go to infinite small. So that's the smallest particle, in my mind, is the particle transmitted light. So now let's see what happens to the smallest particle in the universe. Is that our magnet particles or some other particles? I want to find what is the smallest particle. So this go back to the concept of light. So we know light is an oscillation or vibration of the medium. So in this case, so we know if light is a vibration, so vibration requires elasticity. So we know this medium has an elastic property. In order to make things elastic, it has to be magnetic attraction repulsion force to keep particles have elasticity. So that means what? The particle, the smallest particle in the medium of light is a magnetic particle. Could called the neutral particle be another smallest particle? So think about it. If we have two neutral particles, how could the two neutral particles binding together form one bigger particle? It couldn't. So now let's see, based on elimination method, either particle are charged, say like a negative charge or positive charge. These particles cannot exist. So we explained that during the electron. And the neutral particle cannot form a bigger particle. So then what is left? And we know the smallest particle transmitting light has to be magnetic particle. So that's where I conclude the smallest particle and the only particle can make up the universe we see, we feel, is a magnetic particle. Okay, so at this moment, I want to show what is the application for it, right? So now let's imagine the first one we need to solve is electric charge. If the smallest particle or all the particles made up the universe are magnetic particle, so what is charge, David?
It's a magnetic force.
Magnetic pole. That's you gotta see. Electrons are magnets. So the charge carried by electrons are magnetic pole. So electric charge, the origin of electric charge, this is one of the biggest mystery in the universe, is just magnetic pole. The four fundamental forces.
Which is what you mentioned to me earlier in the day,
Yes.
right? The four
Fundamental forces. We have to unify. So I'm just trying to unify the four forces. So that's what's called, one is called gravity. I will talk about that later. So now we know called a magnetic force, and one is called a strong force, strong nuclear force, and the one is called a weak nuclear force. So I'm gonna try to unify what is a strong nuclear force. Okay, so now, so if electron are magnetic particle, and the atom are magnetic particle, so what is called a nuclear force? So we said nuclear force has called a strong nuclear force and a weak nuclear force. So what is a strong nuclear force? How they develop? Assuming we have a two type of charge, say electrons negative charge, and protons positive charge, and the nucleus has protons or neutrons. So how could the protons in the nucleus combine together? Because we see the nucleus made by protons and the neutrons. How could a like charge particle combine together? We cannot, based on the current theory. So that's why we said it has to exert a force stronger than magnetic repulsion. to push them together. That's how called the nuclear force is being developed. The binding atom force is what? It's a magnetic force. The reason, since every particles are magnetic particles, what happens? Magnetic particles would attract them naturally together. They would attract another. We do not need another force them together.
Yes.
So I'm answering one biggest mystery called the strong force. I do not believe a strong force existed, because if it does not need it, it should not exist. Another nuclear force called the weak nuclear force. So I want to show, does the weak nuclear force exist or not? We find out the neutrons can do called spontaneously radioactive decay. Neutrons can be called decomposed into one proton, one electron, and plus some neutrinos. So what force can make a neutron break? So we can have some particles fly out. So that's called beta decay. So basically electrons flying out of a nucleus. So that's why we said we're puzzled. If strings push them together, nothing should fly away, right? So what force is that? I try to demonstrate the weak nuclear force cannot exist either. So the first thing is, what happens, so these are 5 magnets. What happens if I separate them and then try to push them together? David, you have any guess? What's going to happen to them?
They're going to repel or connect. Connect, yeah.
Connect, attract. Because I was this way, I put it this way.
Okay, yeah.
So what happens, David, if I push them together?
They're going to attract. Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, the second question got a little bit more difficult. So if I separate them, turn the side 180 degrees, what do you expect to happen if I'm pushing them closer towards each other?
Repel?
Because like charge repel.
Oh.
Repel until. So now, the third question, if I take one away from the side and put it right here, can you give a guess what's going to happen to them?
Attract?
Attract or repel, right? Or do nothing, right? Yeah. But I'm going to make sure it has to do something, so close enough. Let's see what happens.
Oh.
Did you see conservation of energies in work? So that's how, if you think about it, all the atoms are formed by magnetic particles. So the chemical reaction or nuclear reaction is nothing more just exchanging particles. I just set up the I do not need to put there because magnetic particle can attract particle in the same time. Can eject a particle. That's exactly what they call the weak nuclear force do. You see, particle can eject radioactivity. Particle can fly out the nucleus. Where comes that one? It's magnetic repulsion. So now, let's say we unified 3 of the 4 now. Say magnetic force and a strong nuclear force does not exist. Weak nuclear force does not exist either, does not need it. The problem with current gravity is we're assuming gravity is attraction only force, right? Attraction only force. But if based on this theory, say smallest particles are magnetic particles. So that means no matter only attract, but actually they also repel. When you have 2 magnetic particles together, you see what happens. Even though like pole facing together, under the free state, they will free rotate. After rotate, and then opposite poles started facing each other and attract. So it's a resultant effect of magnetic attraction. Magnetic force will create the phenomenon. Looks like everything attracts each other. So for the last force we have not unified is gravity. So based on this theory, gravity is nothing more just magnetic attraction. Since my middle school, I always have a problem with a chemical reaction. Whenever we do chemical reaction, we always generate a heat reaction. The two different substances mixed together suddenly generate huge heat and bubbling, even explosion. Right?
Yeah.
I said, where comes the heat? I can use this one to explain. So the particles, chemical reaction, just the exchanging particles, break this old substance, form new substance. What happens? When you break the old system, you eject particle, create a random vibration. That's heat. So now I wanted to use this experiment to demonstrate how chemical reaction, electricity, and the light work together. So this is basically, it's called glowing sticks. So they have two different type of chemical liquid inside of here. So there is a glass tube. Internal there's glass tube, one type of liquid, and outside the glass tube there's another type of liquid. So what happens if I bending this one? What did you see here? Number one, it changing color. Changing color, right? Originally brownish, now it's blue. Number two, glowing. Not just color change.
Yeah.
Started light. Whenever we see light, we know have electricity in moving, right?
Yeah.
Generate light. So what's going on here? So if you think about it, chemical reaction is nothing more just a magnetic particles interaction. So what happens when you magnetic particles interaction create motion, oscillation? That's what electricity is. And once you have a magnetic particle in motion, and we know surrounding the space filled with called magnetic medium, because the particle, the medium transmitted light is a magnetic particle. So what happens to the medium when you have a particles in motion, constantly in motion, vibration? You create wave in the medium, and these waves are the lights. Light is oscillation, or called vibration, of magnetic medium. Electricity is oscillation of magnetic particles, because every single atoms inside of a coil are magnetic particles. So when you rotate the magnetic particles inside of a magnetic field, what happens? The particles in the coil oscillating. So that's called the electricity. Electricity is wave motion. Light is vibration of the medium, magnetic medium. And heat is a random vibration of atoms or molecules. It's all about the wave motion, the vibration. Light is oscillating. That's how our eyes can perceive light. Light come in, that's solar panel. So light come in is a magnetic particle, is a magnetic medium vibration. What happens to the atom in the solar panel? All the particles inside the solar panel, magnetic particle, of course, vibrate. That particle vibrate inside of the panel, started called wave motion. That's what electricity is. That's exactly what the retina works. Retina just like a magnetic sensor, photo sensor. When you light come in, it's a magnetic vibration. Create the sensor, the magnetic particles are vibrating, so create electrical signal. It's just magnetic oscillation.
You mentioned earlier that the distinguishing between electromagnetism and magnetism is a very important distinguishing point. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
That's a great question. This goes to the heart of this discovery. So, because so far nobody knows what is the electric charge, so that's a problem. So then we cannot explain the phenomenon called electricity, because we do not understand charge, we do not understand electricity. So then we created this kind of phenomenon called electrical magnetism. I thought very, very funny. Why the electrical and the magnetism, why they lump two foreign words together as one? So there's some problem with this understanding. What is electricity? It's oscillation of a magnetic particle, okay? What is a charge? Charge is a magnetic pole. So the so-called electric field is when you have a time-varying magnetic field, it's just oscillating magnetic particle, you create an alternating magnetic field. That's what electric field is. So once we understand this one, we can take electrical out, because the electric force is magnetic force. Electric field is a time-varying magnetic field. When you have a moving magnets, you have a moving magnetic field, so that's electric field. And if you have a magnetic pole, you have an electric charge. So electrical force, just magnetic force. So in order to make the simplest electric motor, so I need a battery as a minimum element, because in electrical, we need the electric power. So in order to make a motion, so I need what? Need magnets. Let's see what happens if I put. So I'm gonna use the plastic cap here. That's how things in motion. So I have questions for David. You can say, what happens if I turn magnets around? Is that still gonna work? If it do, which way?
Maybe the other way? Yeah.
Further question, what if this time I turn battery around instead of magnets around? Is that gonna work?
Yes.
Which way then?
The other way. Yep.
You got it.
Yeah.
Why battery, positive, negative, and the magnets work exactly the same way?
Magnetic particle.
Electricity is just magnetic particle oscillation. So-called electricity and magnets, just one thing. It's all because of motion of magnets. So that's why one-to-one exactly work the same way. The so-called battery is nothing more just a polarized, just magnets, just polarized magnets. The only difference is when you form a conducting circle, it creates electricity is oscillation. You create a motion. When you have a motion, now you have a moving magnetic field interact with the magnets starting. The key point here I wanted to address is this is exactly how Earth is spinning. So why Earth is spinning? Because the core, the inner core of Earth is a metallic, solid metallic core. That's giant magnet. And outside of that inner core, they call the outer core, still inside, is the little core. These are constant in motion. That's electricity. You can make particles in motion. That's electricity, right? That electricity interact with magnetic core. What happens? Rotate, just like this one rotating. So that's how Earth is spinning, and that's how solar system is spinning. Question for you. Where is the magnet in solar system? Can you give a guess?
In the sun?
That's exactly, you nailed it. Because a star. The reason all the planets orbiting around the stars, because star is a giant magnet. There's two problems with Newton's theory of gravity. Okay, one thing, assuming all matter only attractive. So far we found that all natural field forces have both attraction and repulsion. So that's why one thing is conceptually we cannot reconcile without force. Based on this theory, every matter made by magnetic particle, they can attract and they can repel. So which make called anti-gravity
Anti-gravity,
available.
yeah.
So this is a big thing. But another part is gravity is so weak. So I wanted to demonstrate this one. Say the neutral particle is made by magnetic particle, and that's why neutral particle can attract each other is also because magnetic attraction. So on my hand here are magnets, string magnets. So I'm putting in a line. So these are formed as one big long magnets. So I want to say what happens if I put this magnet on here, attracts, right? Yep, it attracts. This is a very heavy ball. If I put it here, attract, of course. Oh, see, they attract all of them. Okay. Okay, so now let's see what happens if I bend this way. David, can you make a prediction? What happens if I put this one? It's not attract anymore?
Going to repel. No, nothing.
I try to emphasize the difference. Magnetic attraction can change with the same mass. You see, I still have the same number of the little magnets, right? Once I fold them, you know what happens? Original magnets, if in series, become stronger magnets. But natural tendency is magnets neutralize each other. Now becomes a neutral particle because on every single side you have both positive and the negative at the same side, neutralized. So that's what appears, every particle appears to neutral is actually it's a tendency of magnetic neutralize each other in parallel. So that's why we can use a magnetic particle can make a neutral particle. That's what I believe all the neutral body formation becomes the neutralized magnetic field. Newton gravity assuming all matters only attract, does not repel. Based on this theory, every matter made by magnetic particle, they can attract and they can repel. People would ask, do you have evidence matter can repel each other? I said, yes, I do. That's one of the biggest mystery in physics, called dark energy. We observed through the Hubble Space Telescope, star system or even galaxies fly away from each other, not just coasting at the same velocity, but actually accelerating velocity, fly away from each other. So think about it. Based on the Newton's law, in order for something flying away and at accelerating velocity, so that means it has a force. So what force pushing them away? That's the mystery. So we said must existing dark force or called dark energy. So now I try to explain this one. Say we do not need dark energy. Things can, flying away, accelerating. So what force is that? So I use this kind of plasma ball. Did you see this lightning filament? See, they must spread it almost equal spacing around the entire globe, right? So my question is, what force keep them equal spaced between them? Did you see it? Equal spaced between them. What force is that? It's the same force. Okay, so now let me use this demonstration. I have a little magnet inside called the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, the reason I put a little magnet here is because these are the world's strongest magnets. If I use my bare hand, my hands will turn pink or red and becomes painful because every particles are magnetic particles being clouded my bloodstream. So that's why I will feel pain. So So then what I'm going to do, so I have three called just iron bars. Okay. So these are not magnetic. These are not magnetic. Okay. So what happens if I put this one here? And then put another one. Put the third one there. What did you see?
They kept the space just like the
Kept space.
yeah
So what force keep them apart?
magnetic.
Magnetic force, because it's magnetized. That's the same force keep this light filament separate. That's exact the same force keep a galaxy flying away from each other, because of space filled with magnetic medium. Every galaxy or cluster galaxy are magnetic, a giant magnetic object. Space is polarized, like a pole repel. So that's why galaxies fly away from each other. So I wanted to say how neutral particles attract each other. If all neutral particles made by magnetic particle, they far away, they are neutral, because the magnetic field at any direction, you have positive, you have negative, so neutralized. However, if they are close enough, what happens? They are started to see the minute magnetic attraction force. Positive and negative, so they started rotating and then attract. They start attract. That's where gravity is. Since every particle made by magnetic particle, so I believe, so the only fundamental force is a magnetic force. It can describe every single phenomena. Gravity force can describe. That's how localized, how small the magnetic attraction is, but still can attract and still can repel. If like pull together, you push it together, you will see them naturally will try to turn in that one, repel. Now let's think about it. The Earth, we know Earth has a magnetic field, and we know Sun has a giant magnetic field out, billions of miles away. Okay, so then the attraction between Earth and the Sun is what force? People say gravity. We know gravity, how weak gravity is. 10 to the 36 power weaker. So whenever you have a magnetic field exist, so magnetic field, of course, dominant, right? So the real force between Earth is most likely neutral, and the Sun, we know, is giant magnets. Their attraction force is actually magnetic attraction. What about the star system attraction with a galaxy? We know at the center of a Milky Way galaxy, there's a center giant bar shape of the core. It's bar-shaped core. It's giant magnets. So then what force between called the galaxy and the star system, solar system? So Sun is giant magnets, and the galaxy core of galaxy is magnets. So their attraction, of course, a magnetic attraction.
Yes.
Now, let's think about it. What if we assuming the attraction between the galaxy and the Sun and the star system is gravity? Let's assuming that. So what happens? We use gravity to calculate the attraction. The result will be we're missing mass, because we already did find out that the galaxy, at the edge of the galaxy, star system rotating too fast. So no amount of mass with all the observed mass in the Milky Way galaxy can hold them together. So that's why we said we're missing matter. That's a dark matter, right? But if you think about it, if the attraction is a magnetic attraction, you're changing the Newton gravity law to use magnetic law. Nothing violates, because magnetic attraction is 10 to the 36 times higher. Everything will be normal. The same thing happens to the black hole. The reason we find that every center of a galaxy has a black hole, the reason is we observed at the center of a Milky Way Milky Way galaxy, the stars are nearby the center of the giant bar-shaped core, orbiting, revolution, rotating too fast. In order for gravity, if we use Newton gravity to calculate, you know what happens? We said we have to have a 4.3 billion mass of solar mass in order to accommodate the star system orbiting the center of the galaxy core, in order to hold them together. So because we use gravity, use a very weak force. But if we use magnetic force calculation, nothing. We do not need a black hole to hold, to create this kind of motion, because magnetic force is dramatically bigger than gravity. So the conclusion is we used wrong concept to calculate the attraction force between galaxy and the star system. If we use magnetic attraction, that means we do not missing this called dark matter, and we do not need called a black hole. So I want to demonstrate the difference between magnetic attraction and gravity. So as a magnetism, say if I use this one to attract magnets, so what happens if I fold them? What happens if I fold them? If you use a gravity concept, this force only increase because we still keep having the same mass. Center of gravity is lower. That means the distance is closer. We should have a higher attraction force, right? Yeah. Let's see what happens. Why it's not attracting? Gravity force increase because center of gravity is closer, same mass, not attracting, because magnetic force can be neutralized without changing the mass. What happens if I fold again? Even more local, even more neutralized. That's how the neutral particle forms. I believe you have the same mass, you have a different magnetic force attraction. That's what I believe Newton's called the universal gravitational constant, big G,
yes,
is a calibration constant only between neutral particles or between Earth, nearly neutral, attract to sun, to magnetic particle. Right. It's a calibration particle. If you have but between the stars, the solar system, and the galaxy, now it's totally magnetic attraction. So that gravity G constant is no longer valid. Because you have a same mass, you can have a different magnetic attraction force. Antimatter is created by mathematical equation. The Big Bang theory said universe created from nothing. So how can you create this from nothing? Oh yeah, we can create things from nothing because we have a matter, we have an antimatter. But if you now think about it, if all matters created by magnetic particles are magnetic particles, so what is the antimatter? Antimatter, they have two definitions. One is a genetic dimension, so matter and antimatter meet together, annihilated, and create a huge explosion energy, annihilated. That kind of definition, antimatter, does not exist. It violates the fundamental law of conservation of mass. That's the foundation of chemistry, right? Your mass cannot be created or destroyed. So then, there is another called operational definition of antimatter. So he said, oh, matter and antimatter, identical mass, only different in charge. So matter and antimatter have opposite charge. Everything else the same. If you use this operational definition, matter and antimatter are themselves. You see, if this is a matter particle, has positive, negative, antimatter is another particle, opposite. So have a positive, negative. The other one have negative, positive. You can say have opposite charge. But in reality, it's just matter. It's just matter and antimatter just itself. when I first developed the theory, the first true, test I did is ask one of the top chemists in the Kennedy Space Center. His PhD project almost win Nobel Prize in 2010. I knew he's very good, so I tested him about the theory. I said, so tell me, if I tell you there's no electrons inside of an atom orbiting, no motion, no energy orbiting, what do you tell me? He said, you are right. Because one thing I noticed since my middle school year is when I go to physics class, they said the atoms are constantly in motion, like perpetual motion. But the next hour I go to chemistry class, everything's stable, stationary. I said, what? That's strange. And so that's why after I developed this, I said, for chemical structure and in the stable structure, always certain angle, certain structure, the electron cannot moving away. So that's why I asked him. And he said, you're right. He added one more, the most, it is vibrating, which I agree. Everything's vibrating because entire, light, electricity, all the energy is in the form of vibration form. Of course, they are interacting in vibration, but there is no perpetual motion whatsoever inside the atom. I believe this is one of my discovery. I hope they're gonna make our understanding universe much simpler.
So according to Occam's razor, your theory is much more preferable than the more complex glued together systems that we have today, because it's to look for the simplest explanation.
He's really good. Copernicus think about it, Earth is not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
It's relatively, so actually we are orbit a sun. But Ptolemy, he said everything circling around the Earth. He can use a mathematical model, even sun orbit the Earth precisely. So that means if you look at the mathematical equation, both are precisely accurate. Just one more complicated, one more simple. My realization is, in order to say eventually which one is right, which is wrong, motion is all relative, right or wrong is relative, end up with Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation. And I do believe the simplest, the better. Maybe that's because the only judgment say, I can use a much simpler explanation to the same phenomena.